Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have with me today Mark Herschberg. He is an instructor at MIT, one of the world's leading innovative universities around the world. He is a CTO of various tech startups. At the MIT, he was one of the people starting up their very successful undergraduate practice opportunity program, which is dubbed the Career Success Accelerator. And when it comes to careers, he's also the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. Mark, it's wonderful having you here today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. So, Mark, for people who don't know about you and your work, could you just give us a brief background as to where you got started and how you got to where you are now?
I began my career as a software developer back in the 90s in the dot-com era. And I quickly moved into management because I wanted the challenges that come with management roles. What I realized is I needed to develop a number of skills that were non-technical, that were beyond just my computer science software knowledge. And I realized it wasn't just me who lacked these skills. In fact, universities don't really teach leadership, negotiations, networking, communications, team building. It's not included in our core curriculum. So I had to develop it in myself and then in my team. And as I was doing this, I discovered MIT had gotten the same feedback from companies. So they began to develop a program. And I reached out and said, I've been working on this, can I help? So I wound up having this parallel career. I helped MIT start the program where I've now taught for 20 years. And so I've had this second path, in addition to doing CTO work at companies, also teaching these skills at MIT and elsewhere, and now, of course, the book.
So what sort of skills are we talking about here that you say are lacking in the workplace, especially from some of the best universities in the world? You'd think that students coming out of there are ready for the real world and careers, but what's lacking in what they've been taught?
While they know the mechanical skills, right, and that might be literally mechanical engineering or computer science or accounting or marketing, if you think about the disciplines, they are run by professors who have PhDs in that area. And what they're doing is they're credentialing you to say, you've taken a certain number of chemical classes or accounting classes or whatever the domain is. You've reached this level of knowledge in accounting. Therefore, we dub you a Bachelor of Accountant or Master's or PhD. They're not saying you're a great worker. They're not saying you're competent in the workforce. They just say you have this level of knowledge. And if you think about what you do in the real world, it's not just saying, well, I have a test and I can fill out as many answers as I can. In fact, you have to work with other people, right? It's that team building that typically doesn't happen. Professors these days, the university say, oh yeah, throw in a little team building exercise or make sure the students take a class where they have to stand up once and do some public speaking. But it's really kind of token efforts. And what companies have told the universities is they want these stronger skills. They want to see leaders. That doesn't mean someone with a leadership title, but someone who acts as a leader. They want to see people who know how to negotiate, not just sliding a number across the table during a salary negotiation, but negotiate with your coworkers and other team members, as well as external people. That's something we do on a monthly, even weekly basis. Learning to communicate with people who have different backgrounds and different skill sets. That's a critical skill, especially for those of us in technical fields, but it's not one we really emphasize. So these and many other skills are what we teach in the program and what I cover in the book.
So for who is this program designed? Is it for current students about to go out, or is it for people who have then realized that they are lacking in certain skills?
The program at MIT is designed for sophomores, and it's part of a larger curriculum now that begins with freshmen, then sophomores, and then juniors. We start with a wide group and kind of narrow as we go. We chose the sophomore year. That was really the starting piece because we said, well, freshmen are just showing up, getting acclimated. Seniors are out the door. Juniors are just focused really on their intensive courses. So sophomore year seemed like the right target. But these skills, we know they're helpful to you anywhere in your career. The book itself, I've had people certainly in their 20s and 30s say, wow, this is really useful. I've had people in their 50s and 60s say, wow, I wish I knew this when I was younger, or this is still helpful to me because I have these problems right now. So these skills are universal. It's just how soon, how early in your career you're going to develop them.
So let's go through some of these skills. Can you give us some examples about, first of all, the types of skills that you're talking about and how one might approach improving those or teaching people to identify them and then improve them?
So let's take communication as a skill. One of my jobs as the CTO is to take complex technical ideas that my engineers and I come up with and try to explain it to other people, right? People who are not engineers. Likewise, when they give me certain constraints, financial constraints, partnership constraints, risk constraints, liability constraints, I have to go back to the engineers and say, hey, legal is worried about this risk. This is what it means for us. These are things we have to protect at a technical level. I have to translate from one to another. And in fact, all of us need to do that at some point. Now, I gave an example of having to translate technology to non-technology. But in fact, we all translate in lots of different areas. And so we can look at from our background, from our discipline education, we can look at from different thinking modes that we might have. The most basic are we think about left brain and right brain people, but there are more arbitrary constructs to that. We can even do it from different perspectives of what we value and what we focus on. I give a story in the book of where I was driving this old beat up car and I would have a car club. That's one of those things that went over a steering wheel to prevent it from being stolen because it had been stolen before. So I'd lock my doors, I'd use the car club. Now I was working with some Harvard finance professors at the time, and one of them looked and said to me, why are you doing this? No one's gonna steal this car. I said, no, believe me, they're gonna steal the car. Said, I think you're wrong. Now, I'd normally just think, okay, well, fine. We disagree, that's the end of it. But he's a finance professor. Finance professors think of things in terms of time, risk, and cost. Right? That's what finance is. As you build financial instruments, you're trading these things off. So he saw a mismatch between the time I was spending for the risk. That time was a cost to me. So he offered to sell me insurance. He said, you pay me $100 a year and you can stop using the club, stop locking your door. I'm going to save you a certain amount of time each day. And for that, you pay me this money. If he was right, he made money because he recognized an arbitrage that I missed. If he was wrong, well, he'd pay me the book value of the car, right? He saw this great opportunity that I never in a million years would have considered. And it's because I had never been trained to think as a finance person. That was a real eye opener. And one thing I've done to be more innovative is to recognize I want to pull in these different thinking modes. I want to think about things as a finance person would, as a lawyer would, as a marketer would, because that gives me all these different perspectives to make me more effective in my job, as well as to communicate the things I understand in a manner that they will understand better.
And how might someone actually try doing that? Are there any exercises that you can do or ways to build up these skills?
There's a few different things you can do. First, just get to know people in other areas. So many of us focus on, I'm in this industry, I'm in this role, department, these are the people I hang out with. Start spending time with people outside of your area. That might mean having coffee once a week with someone from a different department or someone in a different industry outside the company, just socially. Get to know people in different fields. You can also spend time learning, whether that's just casually reading blogs or articles, or more formally reading books and taking classes. You can listen to podcasts. So you want to start just getting other information and ways of thinking, and you can start training yourself up that way. Then you can also specifically focus how you want to work. So there's this great acting technique. What sometimes actors will do is they'll say, okay, you and I are going to do a scene together. So we're going to read through the lines together, but we're going to do it a few different ways. Let's read the lines. We're just going to do it totally flat. no emotion, robotically. Okay, great. Now let's do it again, but we're going to do it overly dramatic, right? And we're going to add really excessive amounts of drama. Okay, great. Now let's do it again, same lines, but let's kind of be a little funny. Let's see if we can punch it up to make it comedic. Same words, but in a different style. Or let's do it if we really were in love with each other. How would we say these lines to each other? Right, we're going to do it all these different ways. And actors do this because then when they go to do the scene, they know you're not reading it purely flat or purely romantic, but there might be certain lines that work well as comedy, as dramatic, as flat. It's almost like stretching before you do a particular sport, right? You want to go to the extreme so you're not caught off guard when you have to do that stretch. So the same thing can be done by actors, and we can do it too. When we look at problems, challenges, opportunities, we can think, how would I approach it from this perspective? How would I approach it with this background, with this type of training? And you're going to start to engage mental muscles. You're going to start to think of things in ways that you might not have given your primary mode of thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big proponent for getting new different types of knowledge as well. I always tell my students and my clients to try and put yourself in unfamiliar situations and get more different types of knowledge, meeting new different types of people. That's where some of the new unique combinations usually come from which the new creative, innovative ideas can sprout.
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of this in general. One of the most enlightening moments for me in my career, in school, I studied both physics and as a minor in political science. And in physics, we have something called the Ising model. This is a model of magnetic materials. And basically within a magnetic material, you've got all these little bipoles, right? All these tiny little magnets, which are basically the atoms or molecules, and they're all in different random directions. But if you apply any energy to it, they're going to start to align, and the ones nearby flip their neighbors, so they align, and you get bigger and bigger groups, and eventually converts the whole thing into a magnet where everything's aligned the right way. Okay, that's well understood in physics. In political science, we were talking about voting models, and there are certain voting models that are similar to caucus models where you get little groups, and they go together, and this little group, some people feel this way, that way, but a majority wins, and then that caucus all now goes this certain way, and they meet with another caucus that was flipping one way or another and decided to go this way, and the caucuses get together and then they flip, and you get bigger and bigger groups. And in fact, it is the same model. In one case, it's applied to physics, in another to political science. We know option pricing. The Black-Scholes model came because it was a mathematician who said, oh, here's a physics model we can use for option pricing. When we take ideas from different disciplines, that's where there's a lot of great opportunity for innovation. And the only way we can do that is if we expand our own understanding by focusing on different fields. You don't have to be an expert, but getting that different thinking mode, getting just enough to understand the terminology and a few of the models and the thoughts and the approaches that they use can make you so much more effective, because you're going to see things in ways practitioners in your field who've been thinking about this for a while may never have thought of.
So that's one aspect of communication, making sure you're ingesting new knowledge to be able to communicate those ideas. But communication by its very nature involves more than one party. So you're discussing something either with one individual, with multiple individuals, maybe within a group. What sort of skills do you see as being needed to be developed better when it comes to communicating with other people?
So it's important to pull information from different people because we all don't have the same perspective. So for example, one of the activities that we do in the class, we do a case study simulation of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And this is a well-known case study. It's done in a lot of business schools where instead of the space shuttle, they do it as a race car. And you've got the CEO, you've got the head of engineering, and you have the head of QA, and they're all told you have this race car that you've been building. It's a drive-by-wire race car, so there's a lot of technology, and that you've got your big race coming up, But right before the race, your QA person says, hey, wait, there's a problem. And those of you who remember the space shuttle, it was the night before the launch where Morton Thyrocol said, we're concerned about the temperature, there might be a problem here. Now, in this simulation, what we're teaching the students, it's not about, can you just do the math? That's part of it, but it's recognizing a few things. First, the CEO doesn't have all the technical details, right? The CEO doesn't deal at that level. The QA person does, and the head of engineering has some perspective. What they don't know that the CEO knows is that you have certain funding goals, right? And this race, you've got a big investor coming, you're about to ink a deal, and you win the race, and great, you're gonna close on some money. If you pull out of the race, that's not good. That's gonna set back your funding. Of course, if you run the race and you have a crash, right, the catastrophic failure that unfortunate space shuttle had, that's gonna be even worse, right? And you don't have that perspective from where you are. You don't have that knowledge. And so one of the things we need to do when we come into a room is to recognize we have to pull out the information that other people have. This is something we don't teach in school, because what happens in school? The professor says, okay, here are the formulas, here's what you need to learn, and the test next week, guess what's going to cover? What you're learning this week, right? All you have to do is regurgitate what you just learned the last few weeks. But in the real world, your boss never says, I need you to solve this problem, and here's the 5 things you need to know. Your boss might tell you 3. She might not even know the other 2. There might be other things that no one thought of until you're partway through the process. So you need to learn how to ask the right questions. That is so critical, and it's not something that we do in school.
So I really like that example, because what was going through my mind is obviously how you should approach the challenge, and there's probably multiple ways of going through it. But one of my first questions, which I think a lot of the more analytical people would probably think through as well, is, well, how do I come to the right answer? So, well, what is the perfect solution to this challenge? Is this exercise meant to guide people towards a perfect answer, or what is actually the purpose of it?
When we do this exercise, the way we end it is we say, okay, you've now had an hour, so it's a time fixed exercise, and we take everyone and say, okay, who wants to race? It's a go, no go decision, like a shuttle launch. You can't go halfway. So go, no go. So which teams want to go, which teams don't? And we talk about why you made that decision. It's not just about making the right decision. It's about why you made that decision. We should circle back to that in a moment. Then we have a discussion about it, because in some cases, the students may have just gotten lucky, right? They may not have done the right data analysis. They might not have even asked the right questions, but the CEO might have said, yeah, my gut says I'm a risk taker, let's do it. Okay, or I'm cautious, let's not. But it's about making the right decision for the right reason. And so we have this discussion, and then we do the big reveal and tell them, this was the space shuttle. It's upsetting to some, right? To think, oh my God, I just launched the shuttle and killed people. The reason we choose this, you get that visceral moment, right? That kind of sears it into them of, wow, lives were on the line, not in our simulation, but they will be in the real world. And so we need to take these things seriously. There was, I just want to circle back to what I said earlier. There's a really great internal memo by Fisher Black of Black-Scholes. He worked for Goldman Sachs, I believe, in the early 80s. And I happen to see a copy of this memo where he said, I don't really understand what we do here, right? Now, this is a Nobel laureate in economics working at Goldman Sachs saying, I don't get it. And his criticism was not that he didn't understand the basics of finance. He said, our systems don't seem to be aligned correctly. We reward people for outcomes. If you pick the right stocks and they made money, you got a big bonus. If they did not make money, you got a smaller bonus or no bonus, right? And that's the street lamp effect. It's very easy to measure what the outcome was, and that's what we reward on. I said, this is not the right way to approach it, because we should be rewarding people for making the right decisions, which could lead to the wrong outcome. You could say, oh, this stock, everything looks good, we're going to buy it. And then 3 weeks later, a hurricane comes out of the blue, blows it all away, and now they're not going to do well this year. But at the time, you made the right decision. And so setting up the right environment, the right incentives, so people make the right decisions with the right information is really hard. It's so much easier to measure outcome. And that's something that we need to come up with in our companies, but I recognize this is easier said than done.
Absolutely. There's so many strong biases at play there. Obviously, the one which comes to mind there is the hindsight bias, where looking back at things that worked, people usually think, "Well, of course I made all the right decisions. I came to the right outcome." But at the time, they might not necessarily have had all the right information, or even have made a decision at all. Quite often, there's just a lot of luck at play.
And this is why doing things like retrospectives or root cause analysis, where you go back to understand why was this done, is so important. Now, of course, when you do this, you have to go in with what's known as the prime directive for retrospectives, where you say, look, this is not a witch hunt. We're not here to blame people. We are saying, so at the outset, the prime directive says, we recognize everyone made the best decisions they could with the information they had at the time, because we know the world's imperfect. Now let's understand the circumstances and recognize, oh, you made the right decision, you just had the wrong information. Why do you have the wrong information? How do we fix that? How do we make sure you have the right information next time? And so doing this, we do it for failures. There may even be cases where you want to do it for successes. As you point out, that hindsight bias. Let's go back. Did we really do the right thing, or did we just get lucky? And that's how we're going to learn and improve for next time.
One challenge I see a lot in the workplace, though, is people want to make the right decision, and they want to make sure they've covered all the bases. They've got consensus from all of the interested and involved parties, and as a result, these decisions can take a long time, really a long time. And as a result, projects often run over budget, over time. Sometimes don't even get past certain stages. Are there any sort of skills or activities you've identified which can help people with these real world aspects of having to make the right decisions and communicate them?
Well, this is where it's really helpful to understand the culture in which you work, because there are companies that are about permission and companies that are about forgiveness, and you don't want to do the wrong thing. Now, certain companies, let's take whether it's NASA or maybe an oil rig or a nuclear facility, they are very much permission based, right? In those places, they are very process driven. You don't just say, yeah, good enough. Let's just throw the switch. I think it will work, right? You don't take chances in those companies. And if you say, hey, you know what? We ran over, but we had this concern and we needed to check it out. Those are cultures where they'll say, hey, that was the right thing to do. There are other companies, you think about kind of the fast moving startups building apps. They go, yeah, it's about getting out there, gaining market share, and it's an app. No one's going to die if there's a bug. So yeah, we can tolerate some mistakes. We're about the forgiveness. Just go out and try to do the right thing fast. Right now, those are extreme cultures. Most of us fall somewhere in between. But understanding where your organization falls, understanding even where your department falls or this project falls on that spectrum lets you decide, okay, at this point, I have to make a judgment call. Where do we want to fall? And this is just one example. It's, do you have to get buy-in or not, right? Do you have to do certain trade-offs or not? And this is where understanding your corporate culture, managers, understanding what's important, the values, again, something not taught in school. In school, here's the project, professor says, I'll see you in a month and go deliver it then. And that's it. But in the real world, understanding the context in which we operate is so important to be effective.
Mark, we're coming up to the end of the interview. I've really enjoyed it, but we've talked about communication, we've talked about decision making, we've talked about exposing yourself to new ideas. Is there any other sort of final skill you think really needs to be highlighted that people should focus on before they start their careers?
I want to focus on how to learn these skills, because in school we learn knowledge, right? We learn formulas, we learn algorithms, we learn processes. But when it comes to these skills, there is no simple algorithm for understanding your corporate culture. There is no formula for leadership. And so you can't just memorize these three things and say, now I'm a leader. The way to learn this, the way we teach at MIT, the way business schools have taught this for decades, is to do peer learning. So when you tackle these ideas, create peer learning groups. You can do it within your organization. You can do it with colleagues or friends outside of it. You can even create a local meetup group and set it up that way. And then you want to take some content. Now, it could be my book, but there's other options I'll explain in a moment. And as you read it, you want to discuss these things. So when we talk about a communication challenge and I hear how you approach it, I say, oh, wow, I never would have thought of it that way. That's helpful. I've now expanded my understanding, my repertoire of communication to use in the future. Now, yes, you can use my book, and there's a download on the website which breaks up the book and explains even how to create these groups. But you don't have to use my book. You can take the download, ignore my book, read one of the other great books that I recommend on the website, read another book you like, read articles, take great podcasts like this one. Use this podcast, each episode, discuss this with your peer group. You're going to get so much more out of these episodes, and you're going to deepen your knowledge. Because again, it's not just, okay, I know these three things. It's that comprehensive understanding and approach that's so important.
Mark, it's been wonderful speaking with you. If people want to find out more about you and your work, your book, or any of the other aspects we've talked about today, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. You can learn more about the book. You can download the free app that helps to reinforce these skills, get other resources, other books, including the resource how to create these peer learning groups. All of this at the website, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get that link down in the description below. Mark, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.